When I tell people my family disinherited me, they assume I did something terrible. I didn't. I just wasn't what they wanted. So, I let them enjoy their inheritance. Until I bought the house next door and reminded them what they gave up. If you've ever been hurt by the people you trusted the most, you might find something in my story. Stay with me. Maybe it'll remind you that even the deepest betrayal can turn into quiet victory. My name is Madeline Rhodes, but most people call me Maddie. I'm 27 now. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. My father, George Rhodes, was a strict businessman who believed boys were the legacy, and my brothers, Brad and Eli, could do no wrong in his eyes. I was just extra, someone he had to feed, raise, and later ignore. The only person who ever really saw me was my mum, Caroline. She was warm and gentle, and she tried her best to shield me from my father's coldness. But life took her too early. Cancer came for her slowly, painfully, and while my father and brothers stayed busy with their lives, too busy to help, I stayed. I held her hand through every appointment, every hard night, every quiet goodbye. After she passed, I was a mess. I didn't even care about the will or money. All I had left was the house I grew up in, the room that still smelled like my mum's perfume, and her old rose garden in the backyard. That was home. That was my anchor. But then came the blow. The will was read in a cold office downtown. My father sat there with Brad and Eli, acting like it was just another meeting. When the lawyer said everything was going to my brothers, I felt like the ground disappeared under me. The house, the bank accounts, the cars, even the jewelry that belonged to my mother. Gone. Not a word left for me. My father looked at me, no guilt in his eyes. "You were always too soft for this world," he said, like that was an excuse for cutting his own daughter out of the life she helped care for. I walked out without looking back. I had $327 in my bank account, one suitcase in the trunk of my old car, and nowhere to go. My ex Ryan, who had dumped me 6 months earlier for Brad's ex-girlfriend, texted me after hearing the news. Tough break. I didn't even reply. Before I left, I took one thing, one single rose from my mother's garden. I tucked it gently into my coat pocket and walked away from the only home I ever knew. I didn't cry that night. I just stared at the sky and promised myself they'd remember what they lost. Not through revenge, through everything I was about to build. Growing up, I always knew I was different, but not in the way that felt special. My brothers, Brad and Eli, were the golden boys. My father, George Rhodes, treated them like little kings from the moment they could walk. He taught them how to shake hands like men, told them they were the future of the family. Me? I was just there, the daughter, the extra. He never hit me, never yelled, but the silence, the coldness, that was worse. Every time I brought home a good grade or did something kind, he barely looked up. But when Brad forgot to feed the dog or Eli broke a window, my father would just laugh and say, "Boys will be boys." If it weren't for my mum, Caroline, I think I would have grown up believing I didn't matter. She was the warmth in the house, always slipping notes into my lunchbox, brushing my hair, even when I said I was too old for it. She would defend me when my father rolled his eyes or made some offhand comment about how girls just aren't built for real responsibility. She never argued loud, but her love was loud enough for me. When she got sick, everything started to fall apart, slowly, painfully. Cancer took her inch by inch, and I stayed by her side for every one of them. I helped her in and out of bed, made her tea, read her books when her eyes were too tired. My father, he barely visited her room. Brad and Eli stayed busy, too busy to care. If they did stop by, it was quick, always ending in a joke about how Mum just needs to rest. They called it drama. I called it love. After she died, I was cleaning out her room when I found her old journal tucked behind a drawer. It was wrapped in one of her scarves, like something sacred. I almost didn't open it, but when I did, I read every word through tears. She wrote about me, about how proud she was of the woman I was becoming, about how sorry she was for not protecting me more. And one page broke me, said, "I should have left George years ago, but I stayed, for Maddie. I didn't want her to grow up without a home." I showed it to my father. He read 2 lines and tossed it aside. "Emotional nonsense," he said. That's when I knew. He never cared for my kindness. He saw it as weakness. But that's okay, because I would turn that softness into something stronger than any of them expected. The day of the will reading felt like a blur. I wore a plain black dress, one of the only things I had left that still felt like me. My hands shook as I walked into the cold office, still numb from my mother's passing. Her scent was still in the sheets. Her voice still echoed in my head. I wasn't ready for this, but I came because I had to, because a small part of me still believed my mum would have made sure I was taken care of. The lawyer barely looked up as we all took our seats. My father sat tall, proud, as if this were just another business meeting. Brad and Eli lounged like they already owned the place. I sat silently, folding my hands in my lap, heart racing. Then the lawyer spoke. Per the final will and testament of Caroline Rhodes, all properties, financial accounts and possessions are to be inherited by her sons, Bradley and Elijah Rhodes. I blinked. I thought I misheard. No mention of me. Not even a sentimental trinket. Not even her favorite teacup. The lawyer kept reading, his voice cold and factual. The estate, the cars, the jewelry, even my mother's piano, the one I used to sit beside her and play as a child, was now theirs. I couldn't breathe. I turned to my father, and he looked back at me with a smirk. "You were always too soft for this world," he said flatly, as if that explained it all. That was it. No comfort, no apology, no reason, just gone. I walked out of the office like a ghost, everything inside me hollow. Outside, the sun was too bright, the world too loud. I checked my bank account. $327. That was it. That was what I had to my name after 27 years of loyalty, love, and sacrifice. A ping came through on my phone. A message from Ryan, my ex-boyfriend, the one who left me 6 months ago to chase after Brad's ex-girlfriend like some twisted soap opera. Ryan, heard what happened. Tough break. I stared at the message. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I just turned off my phone and walked. Back to the house I no longer belonged to. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. But I walked around the back, where my mum's rose garden still grew wild and beautiful. She used to say, "Roses remember love, even when people forget." I leaned down, gently broke off one perfect bloom, and tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I turned and walked away, for good. Not just from the house, but from the person I had been. They had taken everything, but they hadn't broken me. Not yet. The first night sleeping in my car was cold. The second was colder. Not outside, but inside me. Grief, betrayal, and humiliation all sat in the front seat with me like ghosts. I had nowhere to go and no one to turn to, until I remembered Nina. Nina had been my best friend since we were 10. Wild, fearless, and always ready to throw a punch for someone she loved. When I knocked on her door with a duffel bag and tired eyes, she didn't ask questions. She just hugged me and said, "You're staying, and you're not giving up." Her little apartment smelled like cinnamon and old books. Her couch wasn't much, but it felt like a palace after my car. She fed me, let me cry, then made me promise one thing. I'd fight back, not with anger, but with success. So I did. The next morning, I took the first job I could find, waiting tables at a dusty old diner off Route 18. The pay was terrible, the hours long, but it was something. I worked double shifts, cleaned floors, refilled coffee cups, and smiled through it all. At night, after my shift, I watched free videos on real estate investing. I borrowed books from Nina's shelf on business and finance. I took notes. I studied. I dreamed. Every dollar I earned, I saved. I made an envelope system: rent, food, emergency. Some weeks I only had enough for ramen and instant coffee, but it didn't matter. I was building something. Slowly, painfully, but it was mine. And every time I felt myself slipping into bitterness, I reached into my wallet and read my mother's last handwritten note. "Don't let them change your heart." She'd tucked it into my hand the week before she died, her handwriting shaky but still full of love. It reminded me who I was. Not the girl they disinherited, not the girl they called too soft. I was Maddie Rhodes, and I wasn't broken. Not yet. 3 years changed everything. Gone was the broken girl who had slept in her car, heart shattered and pockets nearly empty. In her place stood a woman who had clawed her way back from rock bottom. One double shift, one skipped coffee, one online class at a time. Maddie had saved every dime, every tip. She drove an old second-hand car, wore thrift store clothes, and never once complained. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was preparing. She had a goal in mind, even if she never said it out loud. Then one crisp morning, on her way to drop off a donation at the local shelter, she drove past her childhood street for the first time in years. Something made her slow down. That's when she saw it. A crooked wooden sign with bright red letters, "For sale by owner," planted right on the edge of the old Miller property. The land had been empty for decades, full of weeds and whispers. Kids said it was haunted. Grown-ups said it was cursed. Maddie only saw opportunity. The property was huge, 2 acres of wild, forgotten land. It sat directly across from the Rhodes estate. She could see the outline of the house where she grew up, just beyond the trees. Her heart didn't skip. It slammed. Maddie pulled over, stared at the sign, then pulled out her phone. She called the number and met the owner that afternoon. He was tired, older, and wanted to get rid of the place. She didn't haggle. She didn't flinch. She paid in full, in cash. No loans, no help, no inheritance, just her. When the papers were signed, the notary slid the deed across the table. "Whose name should I put on the documents?" he asked. Maddie smiled. "Madeline Rhodes." She drove back to the property with the keys in hand, parked at the edge of the gravel path, and stepped out into the tall grass. The wind picked up. It smelled like pine and memory. From where she stood, she could see the Rhodes estate's front porch. She wondered if they'd even noticed. She didn't care. She wasn't doing this for revenge. Not really. She was doing it because she could, because they had said she wasn't enough, that she didn't belong, that she was too soft. Now, her name was carved into the land across from theirs. Her house, her rules. And this time, they couldn't take it away. The house was falling apart when Maddie bought it. Peeling paint, shattered windows, weeds as tall as her shoulders. But she didn't see what it was. She saw what it could be. Every loose floorboard, every creaky step was a chance to build something that was finally hers. She didn't hire a crew. She didn't have the money for that. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Her weekends were spent with dirt on her hands and sweat dripping down her back. Nina showed up every Saturday with 2 coffees and a toolbox, her usual fiery energy lighting up even the darkest days. They started with the roof, patching leaks and hammering shingles like it was therapy. Then came the walls, the kitchen, and eventually the heart of the house, the big front windows. Maddie chose the biggest, clearest panes of glass she could find, and when they were installed, they looked straight into the Rhodes estate's dining room. She didn't plan it that way, but she didn't change it either. The neighbors began to notice her after a while. One morning, while painting the porch rail, Mr. Dawkins from 3 houses down stopped by. "You look just like your mother, you know," he said gently. "She used to sing out here when the wind was just right." Maddie smiled and nodded, her throat suddenly tight. She hadn't heard her mother's name spoken kindly in so long. As summer settled in, the house began to shine. Lights filled the rooms again. The porch had flower boxes. Life had returned, and one evening, it caught the attention of someone who wasn't ready for it. George Rhodes. He was sitting at the dining table with Brad and Eli when he noticed it, the lights across the street flickering on one by one. He stood and stepped outside, the air thick and still. He squinted across the lawn, past the gate, through the trees. There she was, standing in the window, calm, tall, and unbothered. Maddie met his gaze, then raised a single hand in a polite wave. No anger, no begging, just presence. Then she closed her curtain and let the silence speak for her. George Rhodes never visited neighbors, never cared who lived around him, never waved from the porch like Caroline once did. But now, curiosity, or something sharper, pushed him to cross the road. The Miller house, once forgotten, now stood tall and proud. Its garden bloomed. The shutters were new. Lights were always on. It was impossible to ignore. He knocked twice, expecting hesitation, but Maddie answered right away. She wore a crisp white blouse, dark slacks, and no trace of the girl he'd cast out. Her hair was pulled back, her posture poised. Maddie didn't smile. "Didn't expect to see you here," George said stiffly, glancing behind her like he expected someone else to appear. Maddie tilted her head. "Didn't expect you to care." His lips parted, but nothing came out. For once, George had no words. She didn't invite him in. After a long moment, he nodded, turned around, and walked back to his side of the street. He didn't try again, but the past didn't just live in her father, it lived in her brothers too. A month later, Maddie attended a local charity gala. Nina had convinced her to go, saying it was time the town saw what she'd become. Maddie walked in wearing a navy blue gown, minimal makeup, quiet confidence. She mingled with guests, exchanged business cards, and sipped wine like she belonged, because now she did. Across the room, Brad was leaning against the bar. He saw her from behind first, admiring the silhouette, the grace. He slid over casually, drink in hand. "You here alone?" he asked smoothly. Maddie turned, slowly, let him take a good look. Brad blinked. Confusion flickered in his eyes. Then it clicked. "Maddie," he said, jaw dropping. "Didn't know you were still around." She sipped her drink. I never left. You just stopped looking. Brad laughed awkwardly, but Maddie didn't join him. Her eyes were cool, distant. She turned away and walked toward a group of investors, leaving him standing alone in his rented tuxedo. Later that night, as Brad watched her from across the room, something twisted in his chest. She hadn't begged, she hadn't chased, she'd risen, and they had no part in it. Not anymore. Maddie hosted her housewarming on a crisp Sunday afternoon. The sky was clear, and the scent of fresh paint and baked apple pie drifted through the open windows. She didn't invite her father or brothers, just the people who mattered, her neighbors, local business owners, and a few city council members. The lawn filled with laughter and conversation. Children ran across the trimmed grass, and Maddie moved through the crowd with quiet grace, thanking guests for coming, making sure everyone felt welcome. Word traveled fast, quicker than she expected. From across the street, George stood on his porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the cars line Maddie's driveway. Brad and Eli joined him, their faces tight as they noticed familiar faces entering her gate. Mr. Dawkins from the bank, Mayor Lopez, even Mr. Hulstrom from the town chamber. People they had once thought loyal to them were now raising glasses in Maddie's yard. Inside, Nina clinked her drink against Maddie's. You did it, Mads. You really did. Maddie smiled, a quiet joy behind her eyes. And I told Mrs. Winslow about the donation, Nina added casually. Maddie blinked. You what? She was stunned. I mean, giving up that much land to the Wildlife Foundation. That's legacy-level stuff. Maddie glanced toward the back edge of her property, where the trees stretched thick and wild. She'd quietly signed the donation weeks ago, in honor of her mum. She hadn't wanted praise, just peace. But now, whispers of admiration circled the party. Across the road, George's grip on his glass tightened. For the first time in his life, the town wasn't looking at the road's men. They were looking at the daughter he had cast out, and she was shining. Later that evening, as the guests said goodbye and the yard fell quiet, Maddie walked to the fence line, where Caroline's rosebush still bloomed, neglected but alive. She knelt and pulled out the weeds, her fingers gentle. I see you, she whispered, brushing dirt from a petal. I'm still here. Every morning after, she watered that bush, quietly, softly, not for revenge, but because love, unlike bitterness, never needed to announce itself. It started with whispers around town. Brad and Eli had put nearly everything they had into some flashy tech startup that promised triple returns. It crashed within months. Loans defaulted. Their cars were repossessed. The road's name, once spoken with automatic respect, was now tangled with pity and smirks. George tried to act unfazed at first, still walking into the country club with his chin up, but people noticed. The servers whispered about unpaid tabs. Neighbors mentioned the dying grass on the once pristine road's lawn. And through it all, Maddie said nothing. She saw the foreclosure notice appear quietly on the front gate of her childhood home one morning, while watering her mother's rosebush. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stared for a long moment, then turned back to her garden. Brad and Eli avoided town gatherings now. People said they were arguing constantly, blaming each other for the collapse. Maddie didn't reach out. Not once. She had already buried her grief for that family. Then one grey afternoon, the knock came again. She opened the door to find George standing there, older somehow than she remembered. His posture was straighter than ever, but his face had changed. His jaw was clenched, but not with arrogance, with defeat. I came to talk, he said. Maddie didn't move. I'm listening. George hesitated. I made mistakes. She met his eyes calmly. Number you made choices. The silence between them stretched out, heavy like wet air before a storm. George looked past her shoulder, maybe trying to catch a glimpse of the life he once denied her. The polished floors, the glowing fireplace, the framed photos on the wall, none of which included him. I thought I was doing what was best, he muttered, more to himself than to her. You were doing what was best for you, she corrected. You raised your sons to chase status. You left your daughter to learn survival. His mouth twitched. Maybe he wanted to argue. Maybe he had something else prepared to say. But no words came. Just a small nod, sharp and quiet. He stepped back. Take care, Madeline. You too, George. Not Dad. Not even Father. Just George. He turned and walked away down the same path he once forced her off years ago. And this time, she didn't chase him. She closed the door and let the quiet wrap around her like peace. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. The road's estate stood quiet now, its once busy driveway empty, the windows dark. No more garden party, no more guests in pressed suits, no more loud voices echoing across the manicured lawn. just silence and shadow. One morning, a plain white sign went up on the front gate. For sale. No ceremony, no announcement. Just the end of an era that never really lived. Maddie saw it from her kitchen window. She didn't flinch. She didn't call her agent. She didn't need to. She had already bought everything she wanted. Not with money, but with peace. Instead, she did something simple. She went to the back of her garden, where the sunlight hit just right in the afternoon, and placed a wooden bench facing the Rhodes house. It wasn't flashy, just solid, quiet, steady. Nina helped her paint it soft green, Caroline's favorite color. And every so often, Maddie would sit there with a cup of tea or a good book, sometimes alone, sometimes with Nina, sometimes just watching the wind move through the trees that had stood tall long before betrayal ever touched her life. The neighbors knew her story. They knew the girl who had been disinherited, discarded, and left with nothing but a broken heart and a parked car to sleep in. But they also knew the woman who rose from it, patient, steady, and strong. Some tried to ask her how she did it, how she stayed so calm while living right across from the ones who once pushed her out. Maddie would smile, tuck her hair behind her ear and say, "Some revenge is loud. Mine just has a better view." And that was all. No dramatic scenes, no shouting matches. Just a bench, a view, and a woman who proved that you don't need to destroy someone to win. You just have to survive long enough to become someone they can't ignore, and someone they'll never be again. The house across the street was no longer hers to mourn. It was simply empty now, just like the legacy they tried to build without her. What would you have done in Maddie's place? Let it go, or quietly build your own victory like she did? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like stories that prove strength doesn't always have to shout, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what's next.